Initializing caution files. Please stand by.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Yep, this one's called The Death of Real-Time Strategy genre. So this someone recommended this to me from my community, so yeah, I thought let's watch it together. And after that we can do some OpenRA. Hey, can't try. Oh wow, original Dune.
In the mid to late 90s, the real-time strategy
Zero
game
Hour
was one of the coolest kids on the block. Games like Homeworld, Command & Conquer, Starcraft, and Age of Empires II, among many others, beloved, dominated the market well into the 2000s, with most receiving sequels and expansion packs far after release. But fast forward just a few decades, and the RTS game is nothing more than just whisper. Popularity and demand for the once classic RTS is at an all-time low.
What do you guys think that is a reason that RTS is dying out? I mean, it is slowly decaying. Well played, it was hard to watch. Man, I can understand it was hard to watch for you guys. But yeah, I never played it. But I have some experience with RTS, obviously. But, you know, it was still pretty rough. But what do you guys think is a reason for seeing decay? I have a couple of answers ready. But I'll probably wait with that after I watch the video. Let's see if this guy actually tells it.
And next to no AAA strategy games have been released for what seems like an eternity, and nearly none are on the horizon. What's worse though, is that not many people seem to notice or care at all. What a shame for this gem of a genre, perhaps its future nothing more than a relic of the past, to be lost in a memory. With the genre heading full speed towards becoming damn near obsolete, it feels like the
I had
industry
so
has
much
more or
fun
less
playing
given
that
up on
game.
the RTS. Or was it the gamers? What made this iconic genre fade away into oblivion? Today we discuss the death of the real-time strategy game.
Alright, let's get into it, boys. I feel like, let me tell you my opinion. If you look at today's, let's say, era, a lot of people are used to the fact of getting a lot of rewards really quickly. For example, with getting loot boxes or getting awards or unlocking gear. Or let's take, for example, a good example is Warcraft. The original World of Warcraft used to be a very grindy game where you had to put in a ton of hours to get a reward. But people, like in the old days, really enjoyed that. And when they re-released World of Warcraft Classic, it failed really hard. And people started to realize why modern games are a lot better. I feel like there's not enough reward for the newer generations that play RTS games. And at the same time, there are still a couple of people, like there's this guy in the 0 Hour community, Command & Conquer. He's called Call Me Sam or something like that. The guy is like 70 years old or 16 years old. And he's like grinding the fuck out of 0 Hour. But I feel there's so much mini rewards and loot boxes going on. And like, there's so like hack and slash games are really popular lately. And I feel like the rewards that you put in an RTS game is probably for some people, the newer people or the newer generation, is probably lacking. The reward is not enough, I feel. And maybe it's because we weren't used to having other games. I mean, there were some games, but RTS back in the day was really big. Like we had Warcraft II, we had Tiberian Dawn. After that, Red Alert came out with all the expansion packs. We had Red Alert 2, we had Starcraft, we had Dune. I'm probably missing a fuck ton. There was also another game that I not played, but like RTS was huge. A lot of people like to play it. So let's see if this is a factor in this guy's video.
Commander. Bloody well done. Those assault destroyers you just reclaimed are going to be very
what game is
useful in
this?
taking down those island fortresses.
The history of the real-time strategy game has a bright starting point. When the RTS became super popular, it was a time of great joy, variety, and great enthusiasm in the industry. It was the late 90s, and the PC, Nintendo 64, and the original PlayStation were pumping out fantastic games like Final Fantasy VII, Donkey Kong 64, System Shock
I played
2,
the shit out of that.
Unreal Tournament, and countless more. Among the giants was Starcraft, an RTS game that was released in 1998. Starcraft would usher in a renaissance in RTS gaming that would last far into the future, offering the most approachable format of its kind yet. It took the often confusing, cryptic, clunky elements from strategy games that came before, interfaces, menus, unit selection, economy, etc., and morphed them into a package that was slick, intuitive, and just plain fun and user-friendly.
Still
The
looks
problem
really
with many
good,
strategy
actually.
games, which plagued a multitude of RPGs at that time as well, was the dreaded barrier of entry. You see, playing a grand strategy game requires an extreme amount of time investment to learning its various systems. When Dune 2
what I meant
released in
with rewards.
1992, it was apparent that this game had a serious learning curve to it. And the same could be said for 1995's Total Annihilation and Command & Conquer Red Alert. These were some of the first truly epic RTS games and provided the building blocks for what
I'm
would
not
come.
sure about Red Alert,
Large-scale
though.
combat,
Or Age of
resource
Empires, for
gathering,
example.
unit caps and supply, research gating, map exploration, so much more. Warcraft and Warcraft 2 saw the potential of these colossal
Such a good
games
game, man.
and simply made them more approachable. Smaller unit caps made the game more playable and graphically digestible. The camera was closer, so it was easier to see. There were less menus to flip through, tooltips were used more, and the game moved faster with
think
a
this is the
cartoon-like
seventh
art
mission
style that
of
would
the
appeal
Allies.
to anyone.
Not sure.
But even with all that trimming, the complexity still remained, because it was a thinking game. Starcraft took that idea and ran with it even more. Starcraft
Yeah.
offered an amazing 3-race asymmetrical strategy game with the full campaign,
Starcraft
Battle.net
was
co-op,
huge.
custom
It was
maps,
very
and a
difficult.
built-in map editor as the cherry on top. It was the most fully featured RTS in history. Starcraft was a game about time management, and to this day might be the most complex, demanding, and skill-based RTS game of all time, but it is still so approachable. It may not be the biggest or the most ambitious, but it's top
what
tier.
Pink Todd is saying is probably like very similar to what I is saying. General IQ is going down. That's why RTS are less popular, because they require a galaxy brain. This is what I'm saying. Like, people, I feel like people don't want to put the effort into an RTS game, to learning an RTS game anymore, because like I said, it takes a lot of time to get a reward out of it. And maybe our brains are just like made differently, and or like over the years got trained differently, because to me it was very satisfying in, for example, learning OpenRA and then taking out a couple of master players after a while, and I felt really good at that. But it's true, like, people get, I feel like, look at mobile games and stuff like that. How many people are addicted to clicker games, etc., etc.? It's because it gives you those rewards, and it triggers your brain really fast with probably dopamine to get excited about certain stuff. Like I said, hack and slash game. You just fucking pop a couple of buttons, and immediately, like, like you're doing sick combos and you're killing shit, and you're like, wow, oh my god, this is fucking amazing. And yeah, like, if you want to learn Age of Empires 2, for example, that shit is hard to learn, because if you're not good at micro, you can't even get your fucking economy going. You can't even go to war.
Pure quality, fantastic audio, great gameplay, and infinite replayability certainly make it one
Yo,
of the
Amrise,
best.
thank you for the resub,
Starcraft
dude.
would go on to
Thank you
receive
for the
one
Prime,
of
I
the industry's
appreciate it.
best expansion packs ever, and a sequel, though that wouldn't come for 12 years. In that time, the
Still
real-time
gets
strategy
played, though.
market would go through what could best be described as the most perplexing and depressing runs in all of gaming. Highs would be achieved, then years upon years
Warcraft
would go by
3,
with
bro.
nothing in sight. Other companies would try their hand at the formula, but nothing would stick. It was a barren wasteland for a long time. The pinnacle of the genre would have to be when Warcraft 3 launched in 2002, only a few years after the success of Starcraft. The space opera RTS would go on to host big tournaments for decades, especially in Korea. Meanwhile, the Warcraft universe would chalk up its third game with Warcraft 3, and then both titles just kind of blew up side by side with success in the mid-2000s. It was an awesome time. Warcraft 3 was successful because not only did it have a good brand behind it, but it was a great evolution from Starcraft. Warcraft 3 introduced hero units, creeps, shops, experience, leveling up, and consumables to
Warcraft
the
3 was
pre-established
really
routine of
good.
resource gathering, combat, and base management.
Our powers over nature will wane in time.
With an incredible campaign, Battle.net support for multiplayer, ladders, and custom maps, as well as a phenomenal expansion pack, Warcraft 3 stands alone as the most generous and well-rounded RTS game that has possibly ever been made. And
Wasn't Warcraft 3 responsible for making or creating League of Legends and stuff? Because like, I think someone made a mod inside Warcraft 3 that was similar to League of Legends or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I think like it came from that. So, and that still gets played today, but that's hardly an RTS anymore. But yeah, it's hard to say.
With other treasures like Age of Mythology, Total War, Supreme Commander, and Sins of a Solar Empire all released in the same decade, things were looking up for the RTS genre.
Yeah, exactly. It's been studied. The addiction makes players choose the game that gives them their serotonin faster. Yeah, and RTS is probably not a big part of that.
Especially in terms of variety. RTS games had expanded outward in so many directions. Military, history, warfare, science fiction,
Company of
deep
Heroes is
space,
also
and even
really
god
good.
simulations.
Wait, what the
During
fuck
this
is
era,
that?
You could have it all with the RTS. But then for some reason, way beyond speculation, the real-time strategy game simply vanished from thin air. Just like platformers, adventure games, point-and-clicks, kart racers, and isometric RPGs, they just disappeared. Why? Outside the Total War franchise, Starcraft II remains etched in stone as one of the last big RTS games that has been released. There have been a few mid-tier titles peppered along the way like Grey Goo, but as quickly as they come in, they fade away into a distant oblivion. Like fighting games on the PC, they never seem to sell well anymore, nor can you find very many in the indie market either. Starcraft II was expected to be one of the biggest games of the generation, yet its waning popularity has given indication that even great brands cannot carry the RTS genre anymore. This may be why there are no plans for the development of future Starcraft titles. Why did Starcraft, alongside the entire RTS genre, erase from existence? One has to assume that during these changing times, the business model for the RTS is simply out of date. Most RTS games provide a campaign, full online functionality, chat rooms, custom games, a map editor, and post-launch support for balance, all provided by a single one-time purchase with no in-game store micro-item revenue. Going all in on an RTS with blind faith that it will boom into a successful title is just out of the cards for most. Recently, publishers have developed certain safety mechanisms to curb risk that is inherent in such a prospect. Whether it's with a free-to-play model, subscriptions, cheap development costs, or season-based content, smaller entry fees and incremental purchases seem to work much better in today's cutthroat economy. Having no cost on the upfront breaks down the entry barrier that otherwise bars many people from trying out your game.
This is what I was talking about, not getting that reward. Oh! Yeah. Giant ass pizza shows up at the perfect time for this video. But this is what I was talking about. A lot of games now create more of that reward system with like microtransactions, being able to get seasonal rewards and stuff like that. And I feel like he's probably like, the genre probably has died out. But I feel that it is definitely possible to make RTS great again in today's standards. And luckily I've heard that there's a company making a new Star Wars game which is going to be RTS. I'm actually really excited for that. But yeah, let's see.
Game. After all, if you can get people to download a game for free and fall in love with it, chances are they'll throw some money at you here and there for content or customization. Sometimes that adds up to more than the box price of the game. Nobody wants to go out of business, so many game makers simply may have just thrown up a shield and stopped making the RTS altogether. The other problem with the RTS was a lack of innovation.
Oh
Perhaps
man,
the
Age of
genre
Empires
just
2
lacked
was so
inherent
good!
potential, or maybe game companies simply were playing it too safe. Either way, the RTS didn't evolve much through the years. On the flip side, action games, RPGs, and shooters underwent massive transformations. On the AAA front, the Baldur's Gate became the Skyrim. Uncharted pushed what action games could do. The continual innovation in these genres alone is easy to see when you compare titles released now and 20 years ago, but compare RTS games across the board, and it's sad to say, but they probably haven't expanded as much as they should have. Again, it's possible that the top-down or isometric view of the RTS limits what can be done from a gameplay perspective. Players need a bird's-eye view of what's going on so they can make choices. Certain UI elements need to be on screen at all times, like unit frames, health bars, construction menus, maps, and supply counts. So if you want to make a new game that's still approachable, you can't really change too much. Starcraft II tried to push the genre forward by allowing a free moving camera to some extent, and by providing directed three-dimensional cutscenes and a grand story to boot. These things added some great flavor, I'll give them that, but they were always accessory to the meat of the game, because when the gameplay starts, it's back to the same perspective, the same mouse control, the same old habits, UI, and customs.
How do you guys feel about StarCraft 2? Like, jokes aside, they tried to push something differently, but here we are. It's one of the only games so far that's still being played competitively, and a lot of people are still watching it at a competitive level. So maybe StarCraft II is the only game that's succeeded so far.
That's not to say anything bad about the RTS. It's a fantastic way to play a game. It just may be as refined as it's ever going to be, given the constraints of familiarity. Did gamers simply get tired of that lack of innovation? Considering the RTS crowd has always been very niche, that's inherently a possibility. Or was it that the RTS simply became unprofitable, leading to a waning library, and ultimately its unpopularity as a direct result?
And those guys are fucking badass.
The real-time strategy genre enjoyed a comfy stay with gamers next to isometric RPGs, platformers, kart racers, and side-scrolling adventure games. Many of these cult PC classics were so popular that they even got ported to some consoles like the Nintendo 64, showing that there was indeed a huge demand for them at the time. But looking back, it's almost as if the RTS existed as a flash in the pan. Interesting for their time when PC games were beginning to come to the scene, yet lost all traction when the industry shifted in the wake of increased competition and demand for faster titles. One thing led to another, and eventually all would-be strategy games simply tapped out, quietly retreating away into the shadows of obscurity. It's sad to watch a beloved genre come and go, but you know what? That's the reality of life. I mean, is the 90s hairdo ever gonna come back? Or Crocs, or pump Nikes or vinyl records? Probably not. The world has outpaced them and times have changed. Interests have gone elsewhere to different games, and companies have smartly followed that demand. Yet I guarantee a small subset of veteran RTS fans, I am sure, is out there, somewhere in the fog, waiting for their favorite genre to make a comeback. Will the RTS ever make that comeback? A select few genres can, and remasters help give the cause an initial bump in the right direction. The remaster of StarCraft didn't really do that at all, but maybe Warcraft 3 will. But all things considered, I have to say that the RTS probably has the biggest uphill battle of all the genres that at one point died away.
Warcraft 3
Alright, so
Reforged didn't do
Darren to
great.
be Darren says, when is Did It Fail coming back? What do you plan to cover? Yeah, I mean...
Okay, well... I hope he's wrong. I really hope he's wrong that RTS is gonna die out. I don't feel like it's... Look at, like... Sure, the communities are small, but look at how many fan-made people made CNCnet possible, made OpenRA possible. There's also a modded community for Dawn of War 2, for example, which I'm also a part of. A lot of people today still play RTS. Are they all old people? Most of them. But as long as we have people like you guys, me, that make sure that the people of today know that these games exist, that I'm sure RTS will live forever. Like, take Bane for example. Bane is probably the worst player of OpenRA, but he's also... I mean, Bane is younger than me, so... Like, even you, Gassies, like, you grew up with fucking RTS games since you were 6 years old. You're like 18 now, so you were like... When you were born, I was already playing RA2, you know? Like, even before you were born. So, I feel like the interest is still there, and I feel like it still can make a comeback. It's... The fact is, what he was saying in the video is that RTS games haven't evolved as much as other games did. That is definitely true. Like, for example, if I looked at Companies of Heroes 1, for example, how the engine and all the models were done, etc., and then you looked at another game, like, I don't know, maybe the first God of War or something like that, looked amazing compared to, like, Company of Heroes 1. Red Alert 2 was probably one of the best ones. Yeah, and they lost the... Like, also, Westwood going bankrupt or whatever, or they got bought up by EA, also probably did not help for the entire... For all the Command & Conquer games. As we can say about, you know, CNC4, which doesn't exist, but, you know, we all don't want to talk about it. And RTS games did really good, because, like... Take Red Alert 1 for example. It was made on PC, and then later it got ported to PS1 and Nintendo 64. So there was definitely a high demand. Alright, let's see. Orp showed me a video as well somewhere.
Real-time strategy just isn't popular anymore. Players much prefer MOBAs, shooters, and Battle Royale. And
Shut the
developers will
fuck
never
up.
invest in making one. There's no way to
Like, Battle Royale is a good example. Battle Royale didn't exist for a long time at all. And here it is, people... It exploded. You know, so I feel like if RTS got completely changed around somehow, then I am 100% sure it could be a very good genre. Like who wouldn't like making an entire fucking base and like using incredible cool units or sending your giant army over to kill someone, you know? And the competitive aspect of it is also really good. It's a hard game to learn, and I feel like it's really rewarding if you get to that state where you actually get good. I haven't got there though. Like I'm pretty trash, but you know, people have told me it's a good feeling.
Monetize it. No loot boxes or season passes. When a new title releases, it comes and goes with little fanfare. The player base dissipates in a few months, it can't sustain competitive ladder, and the game dies. RTS is a relic of gaming's past. As a content creator, I hear people say these things a lot when talking about the future of RTS, and honestly,
True.
I think they're full of it. People love to call doom and gloom. It's an easy alternative to critical thinking and analysis. People who remember the good old days of sitting on the gilded throne as the king of esports, declaring that all is lost and the world has left them
Hey,
behind.
move to Minecraft.
While I disagree on their diagnosis why, they are correct about one thing. New RTS releases have been consistently bombing. I'm going to argue that the core problem with RTS right now stems not from the players, but from the developers. There's been a fundamental design philosophy shift for RTS.
I wonder how
Developers and
Company of
publishers
Heroes
have
3
lost
is going
vision
to do.
on what makes these
'Cause
games
that still has
so
to
much
come
fun
out.
to play. And if they don't change course, they are destined to a fate of mediocrity at best. They're targeting the wrong audience, not focusing on the correct content, and fundamentally misunderstanding who the average RTS player is. And if this doesn't get discussed, it will continue to happen again and again. But why am I qualified to talk about this? In addition to the basic facts that I've played RTS for over 20 years now, have a career based around RTS, and run a large RTS community,
What the fuck
I've
is
also
that?
worked as an independent
Is that
consultant
Homeworld?
for 2 currently unreleased smaller indie titles. This project work acted as the spark that
Hey,
inspired me
Company
to
of
take
Heroes.
up this project. Over the last few months, I've been surveying groups of RTS players, ranging from casual to hardcore, and I've received an absurd
And
amount
this
of
is the
feedback.
second one.
The sample size of my data is currently
Hey!
7,500 responses,
Here we
an
go.
undeniably healthy data set. Using this data, my experience as a player and as a creator, I'm going to explain why the developers keep missing the mark, what old developers used to do differently, and how they can fix it. But before that, even if a developer makes the perfect
Empire
game,
War, yep.
there has to be
Yep.
people interested in playing it. So how many people are playing RTS right now in March 2022? The answer is,
Oh, is this
way
the,
more than you think. Getting
Actually,
user
I
data
didn't
for
play
games
that
can
Age
be
of
pretty
Empires.
difficult, so I'm going to have to focus on what is currently the largest RTS, Starcraft II. Together, we're going to walk through the steps to reach an approximation of the game's monthly average player base. Unfortunately, Blizzard really hates giving out data about their player counts. Something about WoW's decline being very embarrassing for them to talk
Yup.
about. Thankfully, StarCraft II had someone who was the embodiment of passion. And while Blizzard wasn't willing to talk about their numbers, one man was. On November 1st, 2017, Total Biscuit tweeted, "Oh, and by the way, we've seen the numbers.
Oh man. Who else remembers Total Biscuit, boys? Rest in peace for that man. Such a shame. Such a shame.
SC2 has a consistent 1.8 million to 2 million monthly user base the entire year. Co-op is extremely popular. Arcade has received a boost with the revamp, and there's a lot more coming. First of all, 2 million monthly users for a 7-year-old game is absurd. But that data is over 4 years old now. It's not going to be correct for today. But thankfully, we do have some nice numbers of ladder games played both in 2017 and now. We can use that data to extrapolate the average monthly player base for 2022. The 3 seasons for the year of 2017 averaged 150,000, 140,000, and 131,000 games played per day. This makes
Damn.
a yearly average of
Per day?
140,000. For the full year of 2021,
That's
the
insane.
average was 193.8 thousand. A 38.4% increase in number of ladder games played. This growth is almost certain
Wow.
because the game went free to play in 2017 right after this tweet. Unless something incredibly unexpected is happening with the math here, that means that StarCraft II's active player base is consistently and reliably over 2 million monthly active users. This is almost 12 years after the game's release and 2 years of being with bare minimum support. The reason that new RTSs are failing is not because of a lack of potential players. So the RTS audience
Exactly.
exists, but who are
That's
they?
what I said.
This might come as a bit of a surprise, but even a decade after StarCraft II's release, the large majority of players and viewers
He was
are
definitely
casuals.
a teddy bear.
In my survey data, over 3/4 of respondents self-identify as casual players, with under 20% being hardcore. This data lines up fairly well with a comment made by Matt Morris in an interview with Loco back in 2016.
Like most people come into these games are, wings, heart. They play the campaign. We see about 80% of the people that love the campaign, and only 20% stick around for the hardcore multiplayer. I mean, these.
So I feel like lately, also a lot of companies make the mistake of not including enough single player or casual gameplay modes. A good example that I followed was Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V, for example, was very based on competitive play. It released without an arcade mode, without like a crappy story mode. And a lot of people hated that game. Only a small percentage of people actually kept playing the game because they were competitive. Like if you see here, is that if 77% is casual, I feel like you can sell a lot of copies if your game is good. Like, there's no denying it. And if that 70% decides to play the game at a very consistent and high level, that's fine. But as long as you can appeal your game to that 77% that will come back to it, on just like World of Warcraft, there's a lot of people playing World of Warcraft on a casual basis. And that's the people that bring in the cash. If you can appeal to those people, that's when you get the ball rolling. Definitely.
2016.
Like most people come into these games are, wings, heart. They play the campaign. We see about 80% of the people that love the campaign, and only 20% stick around for the hardcore multiplayer. I mean, these are the really hardcore, engaged, competitive players.
Is that like 80 to 20?
Yeah, it drops like that. So, for a long time we've been saying, how do we help these people stick around? Because they obviously love the game.
While my question divides between hardcore and casual, while Matt Morris talks about co-op and campaign versus ranked multiplayer, there is a strong correlation between these groups. It's not bold to assume that the majority of self-described hardcore players focus on competition and esports while casuals prefer everything else. Which brings us to error number 1 of most modern RTSs, focusing on competitive ladder and esports. With game releases like Grey Goo and Age of Empires 4, the focus was entirely on multiplayer. The campaign was an obvious afterthought. The AI was garbage, and at times it verged on unplayable. But this is alienating 80% of your audience. In my polls, I asked how important it was for a game to have various aspects for people to give it a try. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 was not important at all, and 5 was essential. Here's the data for having a campaign, cooperative content, ranked 1v1, and an active esports scene. It's pretty obvious that the development focusing on creating a ranked multiplayer environment and pro play is not going to draw in the numbers. To double check these numbers, I went hunting through Steam achievements on various RTS games to see how many people are touching the multiplayer. I was shocked to see how low some of these numbers were. Iron Harvest sits at 19.4%, and it's the highest of the bunch. Company of Heroes 2 is 14.2%, Grey Goo 4.7%, and Ashes of the Singularity a measly 1.8%. Though that last one is probably because everybody who boots that game has their GPU melt. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, there's no achievement data for Age of Empires 4, but I would be surprised if it were a significant outlier here. So if ranked multiplayer is not the most important thing to an RTS title for most players, why do developers keep focusing on it? It's pretty simple: selection bias. Developers want to make the best product that they can, and very often bring on active and important members of RTS communities to help give those communities what they want. This is a great idea in theory. These people are very familiar with the scene in a way that developers can't be. But if you're a community member who makes their livelihood because of RTS, you aren't going to be a representative sample of the actual audience. Being a literal RTS professional, be it player or content creator, makes you the definition of hardcore. And yes, that absolutely includes me. Of course the hardcore of the hardcore are going to focus on 1v1. Even when they look at people who they see as less hardcore in their communities, they're so firmly integrated to the competitive community that they only see people with.
I feel like the reason that Starcraft II, for example, outshines all the others is because of pro players. I feel like pro players definitely keep a certain game alive in a way, because like, sure, it's cool that you can play the campaign or something like that. It's always really fun, you know, like, and a lot of people will play it for the single player content, but watching pro players do something that you are not able to do, for example, in the game, or you don't want to invest your time into learning the same skill set as they have is very important to keeping a game alive. Like, a lot of people will look up to these professionals and be like, oh, I want to try that. I want to become that. I want to be like that guy. If you have RTSs that don't have those pro players involved, it's gonna be rough. I'm not sure how it happened with Age of Empires 4. I'm actually really curious if Age of Empires 4 is already dying, yes or no. Because a lot of people transferred from 2 to 4. But look at Age of Empires 2, same story with OpenRA, Command & Conquer, and all the Warcraft games. Age of Empires 2 was still being played. It was still being streamed. There's still tournaments going on for Age of Empires 2 to this day. So, and if Age of Empires 4 was completely focused on a competitive aspect, then I am really curious to see, like I said, if Age of Empires 4 is dying, yes or no. And would that be because are the professionals or the pro players, are they standing behind their game? Are they supporting Age of Empires 4, yes or no? Are they shit talking it, or do they prefer Age of Empires 2? And if you look at Starcraft 2, the professional players are still playing the shit out of that game. There's still tournaments going on. There's still live streams here and there, and there's a ton of people watching it. It's ridiculous. I don't think 3D is very good for RTS. I mean, a lot of people like Tiberian Wars though, and Kane's Rat, and I'm a fan of Company of Heroes. I can see where you're coming from, but maybe that's more nostalgia than something else. Not sure.
With the same interests. I'm not saying it's wrong to create a game that caters solely to hardcore players, but developers should know that they are actively alienating a large portion of potential players by doing so. A tacked on afterthought of a campaign isn't going to cut it. One more thing about audiences before we move on. There's a common misconception that the right RTS will grab all of the MOBA players and bring them back over from League or Dota. This idea stemmed from the fact that Defense of the Ancients started off as a custom game mode for Warcraft 3, and thus all early MOBA players were RTS players.
0 Hour was also
Warcraft
really
3
good.
is almost 20 now. That doesn't apply to the modern MOBA player base. I polled about which genres RTS players tend to play, and MOBAs are behind RPGs, strategy games, FPSs, and sandbox games. If you feel like you need to bring in a different audience, you're better off catering towards Halo, Skyrim, and Kerbal Space Program players. Before we move on to the main points, I'm going to switch to Opinion Grant for a moment and talk about stuff. Given the niche I fill on YouTube and Twitch, I interact with a larger variety of casual and newcomers to the RTS genre than almost anybody else on Earth. My focus on campaign-based content makes me a natural springboard for people looking to get into the game. From this unique position, I've heard a lot of opinions and preconceptions about RTS and its players from more or less outside sources. And I think many of these are fairly problematic. Starcraft players in particular love to talk about how freaking hard the game is. How a ladder match is like playing chess and piano at the same time. How it's the most competitive 1 versus 1 game. How you physically can't click on the button to queue as Zerg unless your IQ is over 800. Basically, it's a lot of self-flattery, but it works. People see these views when they're looking into a game to play, and it's not a good thing.
I play StarCraft 2, so my IQ is probably over 500. Did you actually did a test in order to confirm this? No, but I play StarCraft 2, so that's good enough for me.
It makes people hesitant to try out the game. They're not sure they want to spend the time it takes to learn when the community makes it seem like you need a PhD to build a barracks. I think this is part of the reason that the casual to competitive conversion rate is so low. People are intimidated. My experience with both the StarCraft and Warcraft communities is that once you're inside, they're kind, supporting, and fairly non-toxic. But from an outside perspective, we look like a bunch of self-aggrandizing elitists. So no wonder developers are trying to market towards that angle. I think it would be healthy to admit that while professional play is absolutely cutthroat, intense action all the way through, it's
do you guys feel that way? If you got into RTS, do you feel like it was hard to get into a community? Or because like I said, I've been working on learning Dawn of War 2. I think it's a really cool game, and I'm also a big fan of the Warhammer 40k universe. Also, I would love to see an MMO for Warhammer 40k. It's probably going to be the best MMO that's out there. But besides that, there's a mod called the Elite mod for Dawn of War 2. It's basically just like OpenRA. They rebalance the game, make it a bit more fair, yada yada yada. And all those people have been so helpful for me. Like every question that I ask, they always come out with solutions or help me with play my game. There's a ton of newbie games going on. There's teachers in there just as well that try to make new players better. I feel like most of the people are very welcoming to have new players discover old games. It's hard to say. I've never seen RTS being viewed as these stubborn assholes that don't want to share their knowledge to new players. Like, when I played my first Dota 2 game, I already had like 1 year of bot games. Yeah, I can see that. Like, it's the same with Dawn of War 2. Like, I've been playing against noobs, and I've been playing like for a half year probably casually against bots, and I'm still struggling to beat other noobs. You know, it's just the way it is. This is what I said to start with, the skill gap. Yeah, like I said, I feel like people think this is too hard to learn.
If most people knew most ladder games were more like two drunk toddlers fencing with pool noodles, the intimidation factor would be significantly lower.
Sure.
So with all that out of the way, let's get to the core of this. What did old RTS have that was so successful that new RTSs are not doing? It's worth stating that this is not a blanket truth. Many RTS have released in the past that have crashed and burned in ways that make recent releases look successful. Instead, we're going to look at the common themes from the three biggest success stories. These being the Age of Empires and Mythology series, Command & Conquer, and the Blizzard RTSs. There are three pillars that these franchises had that allowed them to rise above and beyond and dominate the market for almost a decade. They are the engine, spectacle, and development tools. To introduce the first pillar, I want to talk about the 2020 release Iron Harvest. This game is awesome. Post-World War I dieselpunk mechs is an incredibly cool and unique setting. The units are stylized and varied from tiny walkers with machine guns to enormous monsters with siege cannons. The
probably because I don't like the universe.
The campaign voice acting is fun, and it's consistently supported with DLC content. It's
Robots
really
don't
astonishing
really talk to me.
how uninterested I am at playing any more of it.
I don't like
the game fundamentally fails in its most basic aspects, pathfinding and responsiveness. When a group of units is told to go to one place, they'll split up and head a variety of different directions, making controlling even mid-sized armies a chore. Units are clunky, particularly large units take ages before they're able to execute commands,
What the fuck?
often creating frustrating situations where your most prized forces are sitting around like dunces while being killed. It relies heavily on a cover system for holding areas with infantry, but the outsides of most buildings can't actually be used for cover, with garrisoning being the only option. The enemy will select a unit of yours to kill, and if pulled back, the AI will charge their most expensive units through your entire army to reach it. I want to like Iron Harvest, I really do, but I just can't. The game fundamentally feels bad to play. Many times when you lose, it's not because the enemy out-tacticked or overpowered you, it's because you're fighting a 2v1 against the opponent and the game's controls. It's worth stating that some games in the past feel like that. Starcraft I doesn't feel good to play these days, but it was an upgrade from previous titles like Age of Empires, and then Age of Empires 2 was an upgrade from Starcraft. Red Alert was an upgrade from both, and that repeats over and over, each release
did he just say Red Alert was better than Age of Empires 2?
Where no other modern RTS has matched the pathing or the controls. RTS is a genre where you're going to have to spend significantly more time on the fundamentals. Gorgeous aesthetics mean nothing if the player is focusing all of their attention on trying to get the unit to move properly. Incredible sound design for attacks is worthless if units can't find their way to the battlefield. In games like shooters, the technical investment is far lower. Engines come with pre-provided tools and developers have a firm understanding of the genre by now. But RTS needs a little bit more care under the hood. For all you executives and project managers out there, it might seem difficult to justify spending all the extra time and money on getting these fundamentals correct. But I promise you that by the end of this video, you will understand that this is not a barrier to entry for the genre, but instead an investment into saving more time, effort, and money down the line.
Yep.
One thing I find incredibly fascinating about the big three is they managed to span all of the main settings of gaming. Age of Empires was historical, Command & Conquer was modern fantasy, Warcraft was high fantasy, and Starcraft was sci-fi. Despite the settings being so wildly different, each of these games do a great job with the second pillar, spectacle. Spectacle doesn't need much explanation. Cool things are cool, and using cool things is fun. Age of Empires allowed players to recreate history in a way that was completely novel at the time. Age mythology brought literal deities into the mix, dropping meteors and thunderstorms on your opponent before moving in with an army of minotaurs and chimera. Command & Conquer started fairly average, but it dialed up to 11 with the regular series. Weather control, Tesla coil troopers, zeppelins, mind-controlling enemies to run them into a grinder to harvest them for resources. It's crazy. Warcraft hit all the fantasy notes.
Don't talk about the
Pillaging your
meat
foes
grinder,
with
man.
orcs, ambushing as elves, powerful heroes that shape the battles around them. A huge, diverse selection of third-party creeps that can be both fought for rewards and hired as mercenaries. And finally, StarCraft's far future Protoss facing against the hillbilly Terrans with janky explosives. And of course the Zerg rushes that are so iconic that they've become a basic part of gaming jargon. Spectacle is what you put on the box art, on the Steam page. It's what draws people in, and then starts to get them thinking. When things are crazy and wild, the player gets excited to find new interactions and combos. Ways to rush towards their favorite unit, ways to make it work, even if it's a little bit underpowered.
It looks
As
so
the design
bad.
focus has shifted towards multiplayer first, a lot of spectacle has been cut. Decimating armies with an invulnerable Soviet tank line with the Iron Curtain just isn't fair in multiplayer.
I don't know.
You can't
feel
have
like
yearly
RA3
mind
is just
control
like a
enemies and
different
grind
game.
them up for cash. It's too cost efficient.
Whereas 1
when the
and 2
design
are
is for
family.
multiplayer first, you inevitably cut the things that should be selling your product.
Riddler
A
Tree is
good
like the
example of
black
getting
sheep.
this balance right is StarCraft II.
So we had all these ideas while developing StarCraft II that we thought were pretty cool. We had units like the
Yeah,
Diamondback,
RA3 is
which
definitely
tank that can
soulless.
move
That's
and
true.
shoot at the same time. Well, it turned out it stepped a lot on the Marauder. It stepped even a little bit on the Siege tank in terms of its role. These units were too similar. And it wasn't actually that easy to control. It was actually very difficult to manage what this thing was shooting at while you're moving it. This guy wasn't for esports. We had a Spectre. It's a new type of ghost. This guy's gonna be cool. Oh, okay, well now we got 2 ghosts. You're gonna pick one, you're not gonna use the other one. And we didn't really want to cut
Seems
the ghost.
fair.
It seemed kind of core to what StarCraft was all about. So not for esports, the poor Spectre. But these are all cool. These are all units that in any other game I've ever worked on, I absolutely would have put in. But since those other games weren't designed to be an esport, they made no sense for StarCraft. But we wanted them in the game. We felt like we've done the art. They're fun units to play with. Why should the consumer not have the opportunity to play with these? And so we tried to find places we could put these.
That's
Though
smart.
I would argue that they didn't go far enough. Originally, the Thor was going to be a unit so massive that it had to be built by SCVs on the field. Battlecruisers were going to have custom weapon attachments like plasma
Holy
torpedoes that had to
shit.
be individually upgraded. The
They-
mothership
they
could
got
stop
melted.
time, crack planets, and create insta-kill black holes. The fact that we never got to play with these is honestly disappointing.
What the
I'm not saying
fuck?
that competitive multiplayer should be filled to the brim with broken game-ending super weapons, but I feel like each faction should be designed with absurdity in mind. Make it ridiculous for the single-player experience, and then trim it down to what's fair for multiplayer. Boring, uninspired units and abilities are all too common in recent RTS.
They tried to replicate RA2 but went completely overboard with it. To me, RA2's charm came from being silly but pretending to be serious. RA3 was just silly. Yeah, I can see that. I also feel like they did a better job at like advertising RA2 a lot better, and like it was also a lot more serious. Like the introduction for RA2 was so serious about like, oh my god, like the Soviets are doing it again, you know, like they're attacking the Allies, they're scumbags, and you either want to play as the bad guys taking over the USA wimps or pussies, or you want to be USA and defend against those Soviet assholes. It gave you motivation for me to play it. Whereas RA3, I did not feel that sense of motivation or excitement at all. Like, bro, the installer was freaking amazing. That was super cool. I remember that. I think when you put the CD in, the auto installer would start running. Was like, warning: military software detected. Top secret clearance required. Super cool.
Cool stuff sells. At this point, you have a game with a strong fundamental base. You've designed bombastic, over-the-top units to energize and inspire the player base, but you don't get to make a game just yet. Now is the time to put effort into making a great editor. Not just a good editor, a great editor. This is the final pillar of successful RTS. The terrain, mission scripting, triggers, cutscenes, and even the AI should all be created inside of the modules of this editor. It is the Swiss Army knife that creates every piece of the game that the player interacts with. We all know the gaming scene has changed in the last 20 years. You can no longer get away
Damn,
with
this
launching
man
a
remembers
product,
his
a
code.
year later
Holy
popping
shit.
out an expansion and calling it a day. Games as a service is the new normal. The new goal is the constant progressive creation and distribution of content in a game so that the players will continue to stick around. A powerful editor allows developers to create that content at a rapid pace.
Man, who
Take
can
Age
play
of
at
Empires
FPS
2, for
like that?
instance. The game initially launched with 5.
Have you ever played CNC Generals 2? I have never played it. I am curious to how I haven't even seen how it looks like, but I'm curious to see how they were making it, and I don't even remember why it. I think it got canceled because people already thought it was fucking trash.
5 campaigns, and as time went on, due to having a well-designed editor, campaigns have continued to be made and sold. As of writing this, the game has a staggering 33 available campaigns with almost 250 missions. This
That's
is
a
an
lot of
incredible
missions.
amount of content to be pushing out.
Single
a constant
player
way to reliably draw players
casual
back
people.
into the ecosystem, getting them hyped for the next content release. A powerful editor also gives the flexibility to capitalize on things that have accidentally become successful. Starcraft II's co-op commander system was initially a tiny side project when it debuted in 2015. It was considered less important than Legacy of the Void's campaign, the mission packs, and of course the star of the show according to Blizzard, Archon mode. Well, it turned out Archon mode sucked and was a complete failure, but co-op was incredibly successful, and Blizzard was able to rapidly expand on it, turning it from a selection of 6 heroes to the current 18, as well as adding in a mutator and prestige system for massive levels of replayability off of a very small development team. If the editor they were working with was not as robust, flexible, and easy to use, that opportunity would have left them by the wayside. But now I have to admit, I've been a bit misleading so far. I said that these 3 pillars provided the support that old school RTSs had that led them to greatness, and that modern releases failed because they didn't have them. But that's not exactly it. These pillars serve as the catalyst for the true reason. What is the most powerful force in all of gaming?
Alright, here we go, boys.
The core of the genre
Here we
has
go.
been lost and must return for a successful game.
What
of
is
course,
it?
I'm talking about player-generated content. ModDB is a website for modding games, with a focus on older titles. It's not as big as places like
I
Escape
never played Age
Workshop
of
or Nexus
Mythology.
Mods, but it's been around for a while. Slightly more recent games like Minecraft have 2 million mod downloads there, while some of the bigger titles from the old days like Half-Life and GTA San Andreas have almost 9 million mod downloads.
San Andreas,
that is
boys.
a lot,
Holy
but it's also
shit.
unsurprising.
Brings me
GTA
back.
and Half-Life are not just
Keep
big
up,
brands,
motherfucker.
they're cultural juggernauts in gaming. What is surprising is that both of these are dwarfed by Medieval 2 Total War's 11 million downloads and
Damn.
Command & Conquer General's 13 million. But why?
Wow.
These are both good games, but neither are iconic pieces of gaming history. RTS is specifically well suited towards user-made content. The top-down perspective is significantly less restrictive on creative freedom than the first or third-person cameras. An RTS with a good
True.
editor serves as a blank canvas for an inspired creator to build what they want. And while the average creation might be pretty mundane, there have been multiple instances where entire genres have been spawned from these editors, like tower defense and Mobas. The reason that the focus on
Yep.
custom content was dropped
Makes
was
sense.
largely due to emulation. Developers saw that StarCraft II launched with a pretty terrible custom games section and determined it wasn't an important part of their own RTS. But this wasn't an intentional act by Blizzard, it was the arcade not being ready in time. I would argue that the 2 years it took for a good system to play user-generated content with people was StarCraft's greatest
Literal
flaw,
pea
and that
shooters.
copycats are not following success, but have instead been repeating a mistake. In the early 2000s, RTS had a dominant position on the player-generated content scene. In 2010, with the launch of StarCraft II, that dried up. It's not like that creativity and passion to build has disappeared. It just went somewhere else. Because 1 year later, in 2011, Minecraft launched. And if you ask anybody aged 12 to 22, they can firmly tell you that while Minecraft was fun on its own, the best part was the mods. There was an absurd selection of unique game modes
And
that
a
captivated
lot of
not just
people
audiences,
still,
but also
there's so many people that play Minecraft. It is ridiculous. And it is mainly true what he says. Like, it's because a lot of mods. I think even Ganon a while ago played Minecraft again with a lot of mods. But there's such a huge player base around Minecraft. It is literally insane.
So viewers, launching countless careers of Minecraft YouTubers who explored, highlighted, and played through these. The players were given a powerful tool to create, and proceeded to do not only that, but also organically market those creations to both each other as well as the wider world, with minimal developer input. This has proven to work not only in Minecraft, but in other games as well. Skyrim is famous for its insane levels of modability, and it just so happens to be the best-selling RPG ever if you don't
Thomas
include
the Tank
Pokemon.
Engine,
The
boys!
best-selling Halo game is Halo 3, which
Thomas
just
is
so
in
happened to
Skyrim.
be the one that includes the Forge, which was by far the best way to create and share custom games in a shooter at the time. Kerbal Space Program spent the majority of its life as a bare-bones spaceship simulator brought to life by the easy-to-use CCAN mod manager. And don't
Smooth
even get
landing.
me started about Half-Life mods, where people created niche modes like Counter-Strike and whatever the heck Gary's mod is. And despite all of these high-profile hits and Minecraft being the best-selling game of all time, none of them are the
Wait. Where's that
modes
list?
like Counter-Strike and whatever the heck Gary's mod is. And despite all of these high-profile hits and Minecraft,
There's not a single RTS in there, boys. There's not a single RTS game in there. I mean, granted, when most of these games came out, RTS was already like not really, you know. Damn, Terraria, 35 million copies? That's insane, dude. Minecraft, 280. Holy shit. That is insane. Yeah, Terraria is a really fun game. I played it a couple of times as well. It's really good. I'm actually surprised about PUBG though. I'm surprised Fortnite is not in there. Because, you know. But yeah, PUBG started the trend, so I can see that. Wii Sports is at almost at 83 million copies. What the fuck? Yep. Yeah, GTA 5
best-selling game of all time.
How much
None
has
of them
GTA
are
5
the most
been
successful game
milked,
to
man?
follow this
Holy
formula.
shit.
Roblox is. I'm gonna put aside the questionable ethics of the Roblox Corporation right now. People Make Games already did a great video on that topic. Instead, just focus on the numbers. Roblox is only a platform for users to create games, share them, and play each other's creations.
Is Fortnite free to play?
Roblox has 200 million monthly active users. At
Holy
the time
shit.
I'm writing this,
Yeah, you might be
Roblox
right.
has the same number of
Never
players
played it.
as the top 3
And I'm gonna
Steam
keep it that
games
way.
combined. This formula of making a solid basis for players to create custom content works. It was proven with Battle.net in Starcraft I. It was reaffirmed with the custom games section of Warcraft 3. It was driven to ridiculous proportions with Minecraft. And then Roblox came and drove the point home. RTS is a great platform for making this content. This content is immensely popular. The RTS player base skews towards older gamers. And right now, there is a large number of now older gamers.
Listen up. If what this man says is true, then let's take OpenRA for example. Like OpenRA is actually granting a lot of these things that he's mentioning about modding and like customization and the freedom to make whatever you want. Then I'm still curious why people are like, maybe the older people, is why there's still I think there's a lot more CNCnet players than OpenRA players. I'm not sure if we can like compare the data, but I wonder like if OpenRA does give more customization like he's implying, then I wonder why people are still more hinging towards CNCnet instead of OpenRA. Makes me wonder.
Who grew up with Minecraft. The math makes sense. Throughout the entire history of RTS, the common theme between the dominant titles has been creator agency. There's a fundamental limit to what a development team can do for a game. They can only make so much content, and after release, they're stuck in maintenance mode, running around putting out fires and squashing bugs instead of developing new content. When the community is empowered, the creation process can continue. When things are created and promoted, they draw in more players, and when more players are drawn in, some of them will become creators. This is the feedback loop
True.
that is key for creating a successful
That makes
title.
sense.
When you log into an RTS that's destined to fail, you log into a campaign and a 1v1 ladder. But for the kings of the genre, it's not just these things. It's a MOBA, a unit spawner, a tower defense, a hero arena, a Sims game. It's a cat and mouse, Mario Party, and Risk. It's even this weird Toho anime thing that I absolutely know nothing about, but if I did,
the
Mario
fuck?
would be best girl, don't at me. It's an auto battler, a card game, a tug of war. It's Mafia, Bejeweled, and a typing game. It's a freaking MMO shooter. It's a way to be competitive and a way to play with your friends. None of these things were made by the developer.
Oh man,
but
does
all
everyone
of-
remember that RTS game? There was an RTS game with machines and shit, and you were able to take control of every individual unit in first-person mode, and you were able to, you know, use its guns and whatever the fuck it was. I can't remember what it was called, but it was pretty cool. I used to play it back in the day.
Them were made possible because of the developer. The reason that the next RTS will fail is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the S in RTS stands for. The first developer who understands that the S is not strategy, but instead stands for sandbox, will be the new king of the playground.
Real-time sandbox.
Thanks for watching. If you want to see for yourself some of the amazing work of the Starcraft II modding community, check out my daily uploads channel, GiantGrantGames Archives. I'm currently playing through Legacy of the Tal'Darim, a fun mod where you play through Legacy of the Void as a custom Tal'Darim faction, with both co-op units and a host of new awesome ones. I'm also starting the UED AI project, whose goal is to turn the brain-dead StarCraft I AI into an intelligent monster. And on Twitch for the next
okay.
couple weekends, I'll be playing through the 7-player Wings of Liberty mod with random viewers. It's going to be the most chaotic, best, worst thing I have ever played. If you're interested, I hope you can check it out. And either way, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here, and I hope the rest of your day is wonderful.
No
Peace.
problem, man. Thank you. It's that was a pretty good video. GiantGrantGames. If you wanna go look at him, you know, here's the
All right,
here's
so
the video.
Grant made a video.
Okay, bro, that's my job. All right, I'm doing that
Real-time
shit.
strat-